One last thing I want to make sure that you understand about drift is that it is random. It's pure dumb luck. It has absolutely nothing to do with fitness. You're just in the wrong place at the wrong time and something happens to you. Or you're in the right place at the right time and you're one of the very few survivors of some event. It doesn't have anything to do with your fitness. It is solely due to luck. It's called drift because if you graph allele frequencies over time, what you're going to see is that they just kind of do this. They drift along an average. Drift typically affects only small populations. And that is pretty much evolution in a nutshell. So a formal definition of evolution is this: a change in allele frequencies in a population over time. And that's all it is. It's nothing more than that. It's nothing less than that.
Are you recording it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So everybody got that? Any questions over evolution? All right, next up we're going to talk about speciation. S-P-E-C-I-A-T-I-O-N. Speciation is the formation of a new species. It is the formation of a new species. It requires something called reproductive isolation. Reproductive isolation. Reproductive isolation occurs when two populations are no longer capable of sharing genetic material. In other words, they have become isolated from each other.
They can't share
Genetic information. So basically, if you get a mutation occur in population A, it cannot be transmitted to population B. There are several different types of reproductive isolation. The most obvious one is geographic. Geographic isolation is when you have a physical barrier or a landscape barrier between the two populations. An ocean, that's geographical isolation. A river can be an isolating factor. A mountain. A volcano. A large distance.
Could it be a desert?
A large distance. literally anything that acts as a physical barrier between something getting from one population to another. I know of one particular instance where Interstate 40 has become a geographically isolating border. There was a population of tortoises that lives in a meadow about 20 miles east of Nashville. And I knew the professor at Vanderbilt who was studying this population, and his advisor had been studying it before him, and another professor had started this study back in the 30s. Well, about in the middle of the 60s, they built the interstate, and as you might imagine, 4 lanes of high-speed traffic, especially with heavy trucks, does quite well from keeping tortoises on the north side from getting to the south side. And they have actually started to show genetic differentiation in both size and shell color. See how this works? The key thing to remember is there's some physical barrier between A and B. Y'all ever heard of sky islands? Sky islands are an interesting phenomenon found in the deserts of the Southwest, particularly Arizona. The mountaintops are much cooler than the valleys. And you actually have creatures that can survive on the tops of the mountains in the deserts, but it's too hot for them in the valleys, so they can't go from this mountaintop to this mountaintop, even though it's dry land, because the temperature itself becomes a barrier. And it literally is like those mountaintops are islands in the ocean because they're reproductively isolated. Everybody see that? That is by far the most common form of reproductive isolation. With plate tectonics, even the continents themselves change. Rivers change their flow, mountains arise, volcanoes erupt, islands disappear beneath the waves, islands are formed. You get the idea. Second is temporal isolation. Temporal isolation. Does anybody know what that is? Time. I used to teach 2 classes in this room a couple of years ago. I had a morning class and an afternoon class. We have people continue to be late. I'm going to start locking the door. I was in the same physical location, wasn't I? But I didn't have any students that overlapped because they occupied it at different times. There are certain animals that migrate. If they're not in the same place at the same time, they are temporally isolated.
So like geese or ducks.
Geese would be an example. They could be. If you have some that migrate early in the pattern and some that migrate late, they may never overlap. More likely, you're going to have populations with a different breeding season. You don't think of plants as sexually reproducing, but they do. Whenever a plant flowers, it is producing pollen. I worked on a very small plant family that only had 4 species in it. One genus had 3 species, and 2 of them overlapped almost perfectly as far as the geography. The ranges literally sat on the top of each other. It was about like that in terms of overlap. However, One of them bloomed in early April. The other one bloomed in late September. And this was in the Sonoran Desert, which is one of the hottest deserts in North America. Temperatures average over 100 in June, July, and August. Think those are reproductively isolated? Absolutely. We actually kept some pollen from the spring blooming species, kept it in the refrigerator, kept it cool, kept it moist, and sprinkled it on some of the flowers in the September blooming, and we got them to bloom. So they're actually genetically compatible, but in terms of time, they were reproductively isolated. Everybody got that? Third, behavioral isolation. Behavioral isolation. In other words, there is something about the mating behavior of one population that makes them non-viable as mates for the other population. And it could be a mating ritual. It could be color. It could be something as simple as sound. Y'all ever heard the story of the 52 hertz whale or 52 blue? The loneliest whale on the planet.
Oh,
The blue whale normally has a mating call in the range of 10 to 39 hertz. This particular male sings a song at 52 hertz. You think he's going to get a mate?
no.
The females literally cannot hear him. So he sings his song and swims through the depths and has never yet successfully found a mate.
Is it still alive?
Huh?
Is it still alive?
As far as I know. As of 2014, the whale had been detected every year since 1989.
Good.
You had a question, Christian?
I was just gonna say, I know how it is.
I can't hear you.
Nothing.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we use the glowfish example about how?
Absolutely. That is definitely behavioral. The glowfish wanted nothing to do with the glowing green guy in the corner. The Hulk just can't get any action. Everything about that situation says this is not something to mate with. The only time they ever got a chance to mate was if they were the only choice. It's pretty wild, isn't it? All of that falls under the category of behavior. The ranges may overlap perfectly, but for whatever reason, species A simply does not see population B as a viable source for mates, and vice versa. A lot of that falls under sexual selection, as you might imagine. Other types of, well, this one I have no delicate way to put it, so we'll call it mechanical isolation. In mechanical isolation, the parts don't fit. Y'all want a ridiculous example? Take a Saint Bernard male and a Chihuahua female. I cannot think of any set of circumstances where those two could successfully mate. You laugh, but it literally means that those form two different breeds of dogs that are reproductively isolated from each other. If you get a mutation in St. Bernards, it will not be transmitted to Chihuahuas. You see how this goes? And finally, you end up, this is where all of these eventually end up if you have speciation. Genetic isolation. Genetic isolation. At this point, the genes and chromosomes are so different from each other that even if they have an opportunity to mate, they successfully mate, and even have viable offspring, they're still reproductively isolated because the offspring are sterile. Y'all want an example of that? Let's say a horse and a donkey. If a male donkey mates with a female horse, they will give birth to a mule. But the mule is sterile. Bananas, they're triploid, so they never ever can form viable gametes. Now humans get involved in this and we get all kinds of interesting things. Y'all ever heard of zonkies or zorses? These are zebras bred to a donkey. That gives you a zonkie. A zebra bred to a horse will give you a zorse. And if you don't believe that I'm telling you the truth, look it up.
Yeah, it says that.
It sure does. How many times you get to use the word zonkey in a lecture? Yes, ma'am.
There's a breed called a buffalo and cow called beefalo.
Beefalo.
Is that
Mm-hmm.
also not able to have, like, are they sterile or are they?
From what I understand, most buffalo herds today, most that are still extant, have some cow genes in them.
Oh, okay, so they can reproduce.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's called introgression, and you do need to get that term down. Introgression. That is where you get genetic material from outside the species. Zonkey is a rare hybrid of a male zebra and a female donkey, often looking like a striped donkey, generally sterile. Not always. Once in a while you'll get one that is fertile and it will slip through, and it can back cross to one of both of the parents, and that's when you get introgression. Introgression can be a valuable source of new genetic variation. It can be a valuable source of new genetic information. But ultimately, the idea is if the populations are isolated for a sufficient length of time, they accumulate so many mutational differences that they are no longer interfertile. And at that point, you essentially have two new species. Yes, ma'am.
So whenever one does come out and it can be fertile, is it more likely to be male or female?
It all depends on the genetics, the size, and a variety of other things. You'll often have something called hybrid vigor, where if you take two distantly related strains and cross them, the hybrid offspring will be more fit than either parent. That's why introgression can be a valuable thing. It's not a guarantee, though.
Could insects like do that too? Or
Insects, pretty much any kind of organism. You don't see a lot of inbreeding in animals so much as you do plants, because plants can get polyploid a lot. Plants are weird. But you do have it. I told you about those dodecaploid frogs, didn't I? 12 chromosome sets. The key to remember is all of this is dependent upon mutations. All of it is dependent entirely upon mutations. And again, we're being kind of arbitrary on what is or is not a species. So let's get down 3 different species definitions. The first is the one most people are comfortable with. That's the biological species. If 2 critters can potentially interbreed, they're members of the same species. Y'all want me to show you the problem with that? Let's go back to the Chihuahuas and the St. Bernards. If you look at dogs' entirety, the entirety of the dog species, and you graph size, you're going to see a bell curve. And beneath that bell curve, that represents the entire genetic variation of the species of dog. You can't get from this extreme to this extreme without a middleman. It may very well be possible for a St. Bernard to breed with, say, a Cocker Spaniel. Cocker Spaniel, you breed it with a toy Cocker Spaniel. You breed that with a Chihuahua, and you could get gene flow, couldn't you? But where do you draw the line? Do you say things in the middle are one species, things on the end are separate species? Do you want to have all of that under one heading of dog? Any of those are valid approaches. That's the point I want you to make. It is totally arbitrary. It is entirely at the discretion of the person making the call. Would a zonkey be a third species, different from zebra and donkey? Is a member of both species, or is a member of either species? You see where I'm going with this? It's arbitrary. So next up, we've got the morphological species, or morpho species. Morphology is just a fancy word for shape. In other words, if they look alike, They're members of the same species. How much is alike? Coloration, size, number of teeth, number of legs, type of limbs. Again, it's somewhat arbitrary, isn't it? Is a thoroughbred horse in the same species as a wild pinto? They're both horses, right? Yet they look very different. The thoroughbred is much taller, much leaner. Pinto is fairly squat, has a rough coat. But is that just normal variation within the species? You see where I'm going, don't you? The third is sometimes called a geographic species. A geographic species. If they're found in the same location, they're members of the same species. The Chinese chestnut, the American chestnut, the European chestnut, literally located each about a third of the way around the world from each other. There are some differences in terms of appearance, but they're not extreme. You can breed any of those three species with the others. So is it a good morphospecies? It is a good genetic species or a biological species? That's where we go with the geographic tag. European is found in Europe. The American is found in the Americas. The Chinese is found in Asia. And again, it's totally arbitrary. Does everybody feel okay with this?
I feel comfortable.
Huh?
I feel comfortable with it.
Good. Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question about, so it seems like the common theme though is that they can all interbreed each species.
Well, that's why,
Category, they can still
yeah,
interbreed
that's why we
offspring.
use reproductive isolation as the criteria for speciation.
Okay.
But even things that are very different in terms of appearance, behavior, and location, or even size. Y'all ever heard of a liger? It is a crossbreed between a male lion and a female tiger. And it's always a male lion with a female tiger because the offspring of those are bigger than either parent. They're huge. But they will never normally meet in the wild because tigers are native to Asia and lions are native to sub-Saharan Africa. The reciprocal cross is possible. It gives you something called a tigon, but it will never be as big as a liger. You had a question, sir?
Yeah, aren't those also sterile?
I believe so. But every once in a while, you'll get that 1 in a million that isn't.
So, whenever the lion, like, was it humans that did it, or did the lion choose between a female lion? Or
This is all human doing it. For instance, you know there are two different species of elephants, right? The African elephant and the Asian elephant. Again, normally they never meet in the wild. There has been exactly one documented case of a hybrid offspring between the two. Want to know where it was born? London, England. Why was it born in London, England? Because at the London Zoo, they had a male Asian elephant and a female African elephant in the same enclosure. They bred, and the female gave birth to this half-breed. They didn't even think that was possible because they're so genetically distinct. One of them has 3 toes, the other one has 4 toes. They have a difference in size, they have a difference in ear construction, and the hybrid was about halfway between both of them. Literally, they were each other's only option for a mate. So if you had some behavioral thing, it's overridden by proximity. Does that help? Hybridization is not that rare in the real world. The key here is variation. Once you put a new variant into the wild, all of these evolutionary forces that we've talked about go to work. The vast majority of them will be eliminated. So everybody got that? Well, keep in mind, once you've got 2 populations reproductively isolated, that doesn't mean the original species has to go extinct. It just means that the new one has to be diverged enough from the old one that they could be considered different.
So like with humans, like when they were starting out, they were just way different, but as they grew and changed from like species, this is where we are today, right?
You knew there were other species of humans in the past, don't you? Neanderthals, for some reason, are considered a different species. Did you know that humans and Neanderthals actually crossbred with each other? If you have European descent, anywhere between 2 and 4% of your DNA originates from Neanderthals rather than sapiens. Introgression. All it requires is that overlap, and you have an opportunity for mating. They actually found a fossil of one of the first generation hybrids. And they did a few studies on it, and it appears that the hybrids actually had a lowered fitness. Y'all heard about the 3rd species of humans and how they discovered it? The Denisovans?
The 3rd?
Y'all need to do something besides look at your phones once in a while. Or if you do, actually look at real news, not who won the Oscars. I don't care. I didn't even know who any of the movies that were up for the Oscars this year. Denisovans were a 3rd species of humans, contemporaneous with sapiens and Neanderthals. They know of them only because of a single fragment of a finger bone found in one cave in Denisova, Russia. How wild is that? Completely distinct, no other human descendants from them, except it turns out there's introgression with people who are native to Asia. They have some Denisovan DNA. Pretty wild, isn't it? Do you have another question?
No, I just looked it up and yeah, it would definitely.
You looked it up to see if he actually knows what he's talking about.
No, I was looking it up to see what it looks like.
I hate to think of what's going to happen when your generation takes over. No, I'm just teasing you. I sound like one of those grumpy old men. Get off my lawn. I don't want to use phone. I told you about my mom and her tablets, didn't I?
Yeah. Or she hates the new car that has a.
She hated the new car, yeah, but she saw how much I used my tablet, and she asked if I could teach her to use it. So I got out my old one and showed her just a few of the basics and then let her play with it. 3 days later, she comes in and says she wants her own. So I take her to the store and I buy her a good one. She now owns 3. And she uses them probably more than her granddaughter.
So I'm guessing, right, the ones for just watching videos, one's for tasting and one's just looking at photo.
She uses one for everything, and when it runs out of charge, she puts it back on the charger and picks up the other. And when that one runs out, she switches it back out. And then she's got the little one for when she has to go out somewhere and doesn't want to carry the big one. She's like me. She likes the tablet because the whole family's got bad eyesight. Are you laughing at me again? It is kind of funny. My mom's 86 and she uses a tablet, like I said, hours every day. She's wired, plugged in, Facebook, got her own email address, and she's wanting me to buy her a new computer.
Which one?
Well, that's what we'll have to talk about this weekend. Whatever she wants, she gets. It's not like she won't use it.
You should get her the touchpad. That would actually help a lot.
She probably wouldn't like that because she likes the tactile feedback. She said cars aren't supposed to talk. Keyboards are supposed to clack and spring back. She didn't like the laptop I gave her. Yeah, it's fun. All right, so stand up and stretch, pop your joints, take a 30-second break. Y'all are starting to get that 1,000-yard stare. Get the blood flowing. Is temperature okay now? I've tried hard to get it. It was a little too warm, and I don't want to get it too cold. I was starting to feel really good, which is why I turned it back up, because y'all probably don't like it as cold as I do. All right, so what we're going to talk about next is classification. How many of you are freshmen by hours? A few of you. How many of you are sophomores by hours? How many of you are confused about the concept of democracy and the binary choice in voting?
I don't know those terms.
Huh?
I don't know those terms. I'm Canadian.
That's fair. This probably explains a lot about the functionality of our government, or lack thereof.
It's so bad.
At least the state government here in Kentucky functions. If you want a bad government, actively, willingly doing bad things, go check out the Tennessee state government. I have never in my life seen a group of people that are more incompetent than the idiots we have in all the branches down there.
What decisions have they made? If you gotta name one.
You've heard of the Scopes monkey trial? Do you people ever look at history at all?
I look at history to keep it on.
Wow. The Scopes monkey trial, y'all want the story of this? It's actually relevant to what we're talking about. In the 1920s, the Tennessee state legislature passed a law forbidding the teaching of the theory of evolution. John Scopes, a substitute high school teacher, promptly taught evolution in the local high school. He was cited, and I think he was fined $50, which back then that was a chunk of change. But they went out and got two of the most famous attorneys ever, which I'm sure none of you have heard of because you don't even seem to know that there was a past. Clarence Darrow, who was one of the best criminal defense attorneys ever, and the prosecution was William Jennings Bryan, who was probably better known as running for president 4 separate times and losing all 4. It's kind of like an early version of the Buffalo Bills. He could make it to the big show, but he could never win it. And the national media got hold of this because these two were known for their courtroom theatrics, and they set up a little festival out there on the courthouse lawn, and they brought in monkeys because most people assume that evolution means man and monkeys and all kinds of stuff. Turned it to a real circus. Made it into a play that won several awards. The play's called Inherit the Wind. They made a movie out of the play, won several awards. So that was typical. They also, well, I stop because otherwise I'll never get off of this. Back to biology. Classification. Taxonomy is the term for this. Taxonomy. 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 Why is it important to classify things? Well, because we like groups, don't we? At a community college, you generally get classified by hours completed. If you have 30 hours or less of completed credits, you're considered a freshman. If you have more than that, up to 45 or 60, I think it's 60, you're considered a sophomore. It is one way for universities and colleges to gauge your progress towards a degree. A 4-year degree typically requires 120 hours. See how this goes? Humans like to put things together. We like to know what is related to what and how. So we pick traits. Historically, skin color has been a major one, hasn't it? But that's about as stupid as classifying by hair color or eye color. It's just variation, isn't it? See where I'm going with this? When you start looking at the entire living world, it helps to have different levels of categories. And the guy who came up with the current system was a Swede by the name of Carl von Linné. He came up with a system known as binomial nomenclature. Binomial means two names. Humans, for example, are known as Homo sapiens. The genus comes first, the species comes second. Homo neanderthalis. Neanderthals. You see where I'm going with this, right? And instead of using Swedish or French or English or any other language that was modern, Linnaeus picked Latin. Latin because it is a dead language. What group speaks Latin as a native tongue?
I would say the ancient Romans.
Ancient Romans. We have its descendants today in French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and so forth. But it's been a long time since Julius Caesar was around, isn't it? So nobody speaks it. The advantage is that means it won't change. It will not change. It is constant. When Linnaeus started doing his work in the 1700s, the names that he used are still valid to this day. And I apologize for continually calling him Linnaeus, but this guy was such a fan of Latin, he Latinized his own name. He was no longer Carl von Linné, he was now Carolus Linnaeus. And thus we have the Linnaean system. That's how we got it. The beauty of this is it has multiple layers. We'll start with the biggest. Domain. That is the biggest group. Below that, we have kingdom. Below that, we have phylum, P-H-Y-L-U-M. Class. Order. family. Genus. And finally, species. Y'all want me to tell you something that'll help you remember that? Darn King Philip came over from Greece singing. If you take the first letter from that, it gives you the first letter of each of the categories. When he first quantified this, domains did not exist. Basically, everything was divided up into kingdoms: mineral, animal, and plant. Well, obviously, that was a simplified system. We now know a little bit more. So what we have today are two different domains. The first domain is prokarya. Prokarya. And that is simply the prokaryotes. It has two kingdoms: archaea and bacteria. Archaea and bacteria. The other one is domain eukarya. Domain eukarya. And this has 4 kingdoms. Animalia, or animals. Plantae, or plants. Fungi. And protista. I do expect you to know the 2 domains and the 4 kingdoms. Pretty much every living thing can be classified in one of those 6 kingdoms. Some people argue that the 2 kingdoms in prokarya should be expanded to domains. You have some people that want to stick the fungi in with the plants. You've got some people that say protista should just be split up and not used at all. It's all arbitrary, and people argue this stuff. I've actually been to the national meetings and seen people yelling across an auditorium at each other, one guy interrupting another guy's talk on his research. Profanity was used, insults were exchanged, and the heckler ended up being escorted out of the auditorium by armed security. Yeah, people get picky over a lot of strange things. I do also want you to know the different categories in order, from large to small. Don't worry, you're not going to have to be able to name 50 different plant families. That's a little extreme. But I want you to understand the goal here is to group things by relatedness. To group things by relatedness. And to do this, you want to look at traits with a shared origin, not traits with a shared function. Do I need to repeat that?
Yes, please.
You need to focus on traits with a shared origin, not traits with a shared function. If they have a shared origin, they are said to be orthologous or orthologs. Shared origin is orthologous. Shared function are homologs or homologous. Would you like some examples? Consider animals and humans. We have 4 limbs, don't we? 2 arms and 2 legs. Everybody agree with me? My 4 limb is a hand. It's used for grasping. Look at whales. Whales are mammals just like people. Would you agree? They have to breathe, but they live in the ocean. They don't have legs or arms, do they? They have fins or flippers. Does everybody see that? The front flipper of a whale is orthologous to the front limb and hand of a human. Very different functions, right? My hand is for grasping. The whale's flipper is for swimming. You look at a horse. It has 4 limbs, doesn't it? They're all legs. Its front right limb is a leg with a hoof on it. It's used for movement and support. Bats. Y'all know what bats are. They are also mammals, but their front limb is actually a wing. You ever seen that? It is for flight. 4 different limbs with 4 very different functions, but here's how they're orthologous. The same set of genes in each one controls limb development. That is shared origin. For shared function, let's take a look at a bat's wing, a bird wing, and a beetle's wing. If you want to get really crazy, we can throw in pterodactyls. Those are very different groups, aren't they? What's the one thing they all have in common? Flight. And all of them use a wing for flight. That is shared function. That is called convergent evolution. Convergent evolution. It's when you take different paths but get to the same goal. Turtles can have flippers, can't they? If they're aquatic. Ducks. You ever looked at a duck's foot? It's webbed, isn't it? Fish have fins. You see where I'm going with this? That's because there are only a limited number of shapes that are useful for propelling through water. That is what convergent evolution is. When it all closes in on one endpoint. And you may not think that it is necessary to know scientific names, but I actually had a case within my career, within my family actually, where the fact that I and my colleague both knew the scientific name and we were actually able to agree on what species was being discussed. Y'all want to hear this story? My brother's wife just retired this past year from being a forester with the Daniel Boone National Forest. And even though I am a science professor, I am also a bit of a field botanist. And she loves to get out with me in the woods because we get to show each other things. I learn something every time I talk to her. A very smart person. And we had gone to Cumberland Falls for the day, and she pulls out a leaf and tells me to identify it. And I said, that's a southern swamp oak. She frowned and said, no, that's a northern red oak. And I said, there is no northern or southern division of red oaks. And she looked offended. Well, she is originally from Pennsylvania and did her training at Penn State University. Different locale, right? Different common names. So I said, Quercus falcata. And she said, yes, Quercus falcata. Well, I never knew that that was called the northern red oak in the north. She had never heard it called the southern swamp oak. We learned something new. But it's only because we had the scientific name in common that we were able to see that we were talking about the same thing. So this isn't all just being pedantic and arguing points. It actually has some valid reasoning behind it. Like I said, never knew you could get into such an argument over some of this stuff. She and I don't, but man, some of those people I saw at the ASPT meetings. So everybody feel comfortable with classification? Remember, the only point to this is convenience. It's nice to be able to say what things are related to, where they fit into the grand scheme, but it is still arbitrary and done solely for convenience. Everybody cool with that? Okay, next up, we're going to talk about extinction. What is extinction?
The whole species wiped out.
A whole species is gone forever. Never to return.
Like the dodo. The dodo.
The dodo is a great example. What percentage of all species do you think have gone extinct?
What is it?
8?
I said 90.
90% of all species have gone extinct. That seems pretty extreme, doesn't it? You're not correct. You're close, but it's actually higher. Oh, I've got everybody's attention now, except Mia. She's always on the computer back there. 99.95% of every species that has existed on this planet is gone forever. Extinction isn't rare, it's the norm. But now keep in mind, life on Earth is probably somewhere on the order of 3 billion years old.
So it's done happened.
Bingo. The dinosaurs are no longer with us. All of the megafauna of the Americas and Australia are no longer with us. Don't worry, we'll talk about that. Y'all don't know what megafauna are? What does mega mean? Big. Fauna means animals. You ever wondered why the Americas don't have any big animals left? The lion used to exist here, horses, camels, mastodons, mammoths, elephants, the giant sloth, all of that gone. Don't worry, we'll get there. She's frowning at me. I assure you, I did not do
Well,
this.
what's the mega sloth?
Huh?
A big sloth, mega sloth. Like, what size was it?
The giant sloth.
What size?
How big was the giant sloth?
As big as an elephant, if I'm not mistaken.
You got a phone, look it up.
Well, I'm gonna get on my phone here and find
Giant ground sloths were massive Ice Age herbivores, with the largest species standing 13 to 20 feet tall when rearing on their hind legs, weighing between 3 and 4 tons. Big enough for you?
Yeah.
The dire wolf, you heard of that? It wasn't just some house symbol on Game of Thrones. It was an actual species.
Tasmanian devil.
Tasmanian wolf. The Tasmanian devil is still extant.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry, it's not like off of Bugs Bunny.
I think I read actually like a year or two ago that like they kind of did what they did with the American chestnut and like,
We'll talk about that.
you know,
Colossal biosciences. They advertised last year that they had brought back the dire wolf. Brought it back from extinction thousands of years later. All they really did was edit the genome of a gray wolf and make them curly and cute.
So they just make like a
Yeah, it's just a genetically altered gray wolf.
so different species, not the same ones from the past.
Personally, I think glowfish are more impressive. You want some kind of curly dog, all you gotta do is breed it to get something curly, right?
Even though like some animals do go extinct, they also do change over time too. So it's like it's not gonna be the same thing.
Bingo. So extinction is the rule. This leads to something called a mass extinction event. A mass extinction event. Let's see what the current population of Earth is.
Probably in the billions.
8,283,166,664 people. It is now up to 679 people in the short period of time it took me to tell you that. You see the population clock, how fast it's running? That's how fast people are being added to the planet. So 8.28 billion people. I want to ask you a question, Mia. If I wiped out 8.1 billion people, is that a mass extinction event?
Yes.
It seems like it would be, right? Because I would have killed off nearly every person on the planet. It still would not be considered a mass extinction because humans are only one species. Does everybody understand that? When a mass extinction event occurs, pretty much most of the existing species get wiped out. Any idea when the last one was, or how many of them there have been?
Was Ice Age the last one?
The Ice Age was the last one. Well, kinda, sorta, maybe not really. The last one was the asteroid that took out the dinos 65 million years ago. However, some people say that we are in the middle of one right now that started with the last ice age. There have been a total of 5 mass extinction events in the last 500 million years. There are probably at least 2 that came before that. The further back in time you go, the harder and harder it is to find the evidence. Some people say we're in the middle of number 6. So go back 2.4 billion years ago, we had what's called the Great Oxygenation Event. The Great Oxygenation. Sounds like the name of a bad 80s cover band. Basically, this is when life switched over to cellular respiration. Before that, oxygen was actually a toxin to most living things. But I think you all have seen from our totally boring discussion of cellular respiration in the Krebs cycle. You remember how efficient it was at making ATP? That is why it essentially took over. But they hypothesized that at the Great Oxygenation Event, they wiped out the vast majority of living things because they could not cope with the increased oxygen. Obviously, being that far back in the past, it's very, very difficult to find a lot of direct evidence for that one. There's another one about 800 million years ago that, again, direct evidence is pretty scarce, but I bring it up because it's so cool, literally. It's called Snowball Earth. Why does it have such a cool name? Because the Earth was quite cool, literally. It was covered in ice from pole to pole. Even at the equator, it was ice.
When you said we're in an extinction event, what kind of extinction event are we in? It's like,
We'll get there. We got to kill off a lot more species before we can get to us. Yes, ma'am.
Just, I guess a comment. So this is all in line with evolutionary theory, is
Mhm.
what the ideas are? Okay. So there is other theories out there, but this is the evolutionary perspective, is that correct?
I'm not really aware of any other theories.
Like, for instance, mass extinction, there's the creationist theory.
No, it's not a theory.
The creationist biblical perspective
Creationism,
that talks about Noah's flood being like a mass extinction event.
creationism is a religion base looking at things.
But there is scientists who actually do operate in that field.
No, there are pseudoscientists who operate in that field.
That would be your opinion, but I'm just asking if this is the evolutionary perspective.
It's a scientific perspective.
According to yourself, yes, but there is another
Let's talk a little
vein
bit.
of science that is creationism, and it started way back in
Let's talk a little
while
bit
ago.
about that after class. That sound okay?
We can.
Well, if you don't want to today, would you want to on Thursday?
I could, yeah.
Okay. Snowball Earth. Those two are just not well understood. The ones that we have good evidence for. The first one would be about 443 million years ago. At this time, you had an ice age, intense glaciation. Wiped out about 85% of the existing species. The second one, about 360 million years ago. This one wiped out between 70 and 80%. And it was caused by a massive decrease in the amount of oxygen in the ocean. Number 3 was about 252 million years ago, and this was the big one. It's called the Great Dying. The Great Dying.
Wait, sorry, the great what?
Dying, D-Y-I-N-G. Killed off about 90% of all species. And this was caused by the eruption of the Siberian traps, which basically is a series of volcanic events that left the entire area of Siberia covered in lava and active volcanoes. Yeah, pretty much all of the western part of northern Asia. That had devastating effects on the climate, as you might imagine.
What kind of like things did it make go extinct? Like what kind of animals?
I'll look up specifics for you. I don't have those right now. What is that, number 3?
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 was about 200 million years ago. Lots of volcanic activity, killed off about 70%. And this is what opened the door for dinosaurs. Number 5, 66 million years ago. That's the asteroid that took out the dinos. And number 6 is the Holocene, Holocene event. That's the one that people think is going on right now.
How do you spell the Holocene?
Holocene.